Hi everybody, and welcome to my video introducing the Argus C3 Matchmatic Rangefinder Viewfinder camera, affectionately called the Brick because of its shape. It's kind of brick-like and heavy and pretty solid. So in a lot of ways it's really like a brick. This is a viewfinder or rangefinder camera, viewfinder window, and when we see the back you'll see that there's two places to look through. It has no built-in light meter, although originally the Matchmatics came with a clip-on light meter that went into the accessory shoe. This one did not include it. Or it did when it was new, but when I bought it, it was long gone. The lenses are interchangeable, though not without some difficulty, and we'll see that when we change the lens on this. Or rather, when I take this lens off and put it back on. It is a lot more complicated to change this lens than it is with a modern SLR if you're used to that. It has two shutter modes, bulb and instant is actually a variable instant. Here's the shutter dial over here from 4 through 8. And this selects the shutter speed based on exposure value. And so it's a fairly limited range, but basically 4 is 1/10 of a second, 25th for 5, 50th for 6, 1/100th of a second for 7, and 1/300th of a second for 8. And that's how fast the leaf shutter opens and closes. It has very tiny viewing windows, and it is extremely difficult to see through them and to focus because they are so tiny. And in these cameras, which were not very well sealed, a lot of dirt gets into these, and in fact in mine the windows are effectively useless because there's such poor light transmission that I can't actually focus with them. It has a flash bulb sync at 5 at 1/25th of a second. That's the only shutter speed where the flash bulb can sync on this, even though it has a leaf shutter. But it doesn't matter because you can't get bulbs for the flashes anymore. So effectively this might as well not have any kind of flash sync. But if you do have the flash, it screws into the side right there. The Matchmatic Brick. This camera's target audience was entry level. It was a very low cost for the day camera, especially considering the build quality, which is substantial. A lot of these still work because they were very well made. And a lot of that's because they were, yay America, designed, engineered, conceptually developed, built in America. 100% American camera. They are very common in America, considerably less common overseas. They were very low cost. By comparison, the Argus C3 cameras were half the cost of the cheapest Kodak rangefinder, and included with them very good lens optics. These were designed, the rangefinders in general were, of their day, the bridge or point and shoot cameras, what we would call those levels of cameras today. They were for people who weren't as serious about photography, because SLRs represented, for the average person, maybe 2 to 3 months of salary as an investment, and a rangefinder might only represent 1. These were used by many people who couldn't afford or didn't want an SLR, and rangefinders today still have a huge following, and for very good reasons. Simple to use, user-friendly, high-quality optics, very quiet shutters, and because they have leaf shutters, they can be handheld at a slower shutter speed than SLRs. So this was made by Argus in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The C3 line, the entire C3 line, started in 1939 and was produced until 1966. The Matchmatic was produced from 1958 till 1966. Other than the Matchmatic, the C3 was largely all black. The Matchmatic added this nice, attractive tan leather covering. only about 300,000 Matchmatics were made in that span, although total, Argus made 1.6 million C3s, and over the span of the entire Argus history, the company only made about 2 million camera bodies, representing the C3 represented its most popular line. And in fact, the C3 is the most common rangefinder ever made. It also represents the American-made camera with more units produced than any other. And since nothing is actually made in America anymore, I would submit that that will probably continue to be the record for a very long time, if not until the end of time. If you would like to date your Argus to know how old it is, you can, and there's a link down below. This one is from 1960, and you can tell that because the serial number on it is 1820, or the first four. None of the numbers in it really matter for dating except for the fourth digit, and the fourth digit on this is 0, which means that it was made in 1960. This was preceded first by the Argus C and C2, and then there were 7 types of C3, I believe, 7 or 9, something like that. It was concurrent with the standard C3, the Gold Shield, and the C33, and it was followed by nothing. When Argus went out of business in 1966, this was one of the last models of camera that they produced. And so this camera was made just 6 years before the company's demise, and it represents in a lot of ways the sadness and the deindustrialization of the United States, where a company that was founded during the Great Depression, an industrial company founded during the Great Depression, fell apart in the 1960s. Let's talk about what this camera's got to offer. Over here, we have the film advance knob. Now you'll notice I'm not starting with camera strap lugs. If you've ever seen any of my videos, I always do that first. There are no camera strap lugs on this camera. There's a camera case, which I have, but I didn't bring out for the video, that screws into the tripod bushing. And then the camera case has strap lugs on it. But here we have the film advance knob. Unlike most every camera ever made, where the film is normally placed on the left side, in this camera it's placed on the right. So all your negatives are upside down and backwards compared to everything else you do. Very frustrating. So after you take a picture, you wind with this knob. Here we have the accessory shoe. It is not a hot shoe. This will not power a flash. This just is for holding accessories. We have the, film catch lever right here, the exposure counter, and then the shutter release. And right now it's set at instant. You can also push it down and turn it to set it to bulb, and vice versa. And when we look at loading the film and taking a picture, I'll show you exactly how that works. On the camera's front, we have the flash finder window up here. This is where you would look through if you're going to be using your flash. And then even though, and then there are numbers here 1 through 8 that correspond to your exposure value for your flash. And but it doesn't matter, you can't get flash bulbs for this anymore anyway. At any rate, so this is also your distance scale. Right now it's focused at infinity. And now it's focused as close as it will get at 3 feet. There we go. Here we have the shutter cocking lever. And so to cock the shutter, you push that down, and then you push that button to fire it. We have the viewfinder window over here, and then the rangefinder window in the middle. Here is your exposure count, or your exposure value setting dial. This is where you set the exposure value, what your light meter tells you to do, and it will set your shutter speed. And one very frustrating thing about this camera, if you don't have the light meter, as most of them don't, you have to memorize what the exposure values represent in shutter speed, and also what the aperture values represent in aperture, in order to use it without the meter. It's It's actually unenjoyable to use this camera if you don't have the meter. The lens here has aperture settings from 3.5 up to plus, which is a little bit greater than 8. And these numbers, it's these numbers that correspond to the blue numbers on the flash finder. But the aperture goes from 3.5 on the far end here, which corresponds with f3.5, to 4, which corresponds with f4.5, 5, and these numbers on here are for exposure value, not aperture. 5 corresponds with f5.6, 6, which corresponds with f8, 7, which corresponds with f11, and 8, which is f16, and plus, which is just a little bit of extra, like maybe plus f19 or f17 in that range. It's not a whole stop faster, or slower rather. We also have here these gears. These are the rangefinder coupling gears. So you can see that there's a gear around the base of the lens that turns this gear, that in turn it turns this gear, which adjusts the internal rangefinder mechanism. Let me show you how that works. Okay, so let's say that this represents the top of the camera. Okay. Drew a little bit off frame there. Okay, so this represents the top of the camera. Here's the viewing window. Okay, that's an eye. Okay, so what's going to happen is you're going to look through the viewing window right here. Now, on the front of the camera, there are 2 additional windows. One of them allows light to come in this way, and the other one of them bounces light up to a mirror, up to a piece of glass, and here. Now, with a rangefinder, when you adjust the lens, what happens is that this mirror changes position, and that changes the angle of the light. This is all very, very exaggerated, by the way. That changes the angle of the light. So what happens is that if the light bounces off of this window in a different place, then it's not going to align. So what happens is when this is in focus, when the lens is in focus, if the rangefinder is properly adjusted, then that will change the angle of this mirror such that the light coming in here is aligned with the light on this mirror so that your eye sees a single image. Basically, if it's in focus, here's what you'll see. It is your buddy over there smiling. If it's not in focus, then what you see looks like that. 2 versions of your buddy over there smiling next to each other. And the more out of focus it is, the more they get separated. Okay, back to the camera itself. On this side, we have the flash ports. This is where the flash connects, and the film door button. On this side, we have the hinge for the film door. On the bottom, we have the feet that help keep it level when you set it down. And over here, this is the film rewind knob. So after you're done with the roll of film, you rewind it. Here's your tripod bushing, and then your serial number is on the bottom. On the back, we have the viewfinder window on the left and the rangefinder window on the right. So the viewfinder window works if you're in snapshot mode. If you are at, let's say, f11 and 1/100th, and you know that everything from 6 feet to infinity is going to be in focus, then you can just pick it up, look through the viewfinder, and take a picture. The rangefinder windows, if you want to get exact focus, especially if you're at something like f3.5, where it'd be very easy to miss your focus. We also have this little divot right here. Almost every Matchmatic you see is going to have that divot. That's a design flaw where the leather case has a rivet there, which is part of the case covering the snap that connects to it goes right there. And that is from the rivet rubbing up against the leather and causing a depression and rubbing some dirt off. In fact, every C3 I've ever seen an auction for, or at an estate sale or a junk store shop, whatever, they all have that divot. So it's just part of them now. To open up the camera, set it on its side, push this down here, and lift that up. Okay, here we are inside the camera, and it looks basically like a standard camera with a couple of minor differences. One of them being that it's backwards. It looks the same. If you've ever seen inside another camera, then this sprocket appears to be in the same place as it should be, but the film chamber is over here. And that's why the film rewind knob is on the bottom. There we go. And so let's go over everything that's in the inside here. So you'll notice that this is backwards. Film chamber here, film tension sprocket right here. This is the camera obscura, where the light comes in from the lens. Here we have the film take-up spool. On the back we have a film cassette tension spring, film pressure plate, and that's it. It's pretty simple. It's made of aluminum, forged and cast aluminum, some very high quality components in here. These things really do continue to run for a very, very long time with some severe abuse as well. So let's take a look at how to do some things. Since the camera back is opened, the first thing we're going to do is load film. Right here, just take standard 35mm film. What you do is you just pop that out, drop in the cassette, put it back up, turning it as you do to make sure that it gets all the way in. You know it's all the way in if you can feel it turning it, taking the film back with it. Pull out a leader, and when you pull out a leader, this should turn. So the leader is going to nest with the gear holes right there in just a minute. The leader feeds into the take-up spool, and there we go. So get the sprocket holes nested with the gear. Now the next thing you would do is shut this, and then you'd be good to go. The film would be in a light tight compartment. Now film has to be in a light tight compartment if you've never used one of these before, otherwise it'll be ruined. But I'm going to leave this open to show you what happens after you take a picture. Then you advance the frame. Now here it is, it's caught. It's not going to advance the frame any further. So to take the actual to advance the frame, what we're going to do is take a picture, cock the shutter first. We cock the shutter with this lever. I always forget that. Take the picture. Next we have to trip this button right here. And then we advance the film one frame. And we have to release this button because that allows it to advance the film. So when you're loading the film, you just hit that button 3 times and you can load it. So I got a little bit out of order here. The first thing you need to do when you load the film is, after you load it, set this to -3. And then you close the back. Trip the release, advance, trip the release, advance, trip the release, advance. And that makes sure that you're on fresh film that you can take pictures with. Next thing you do when you actually go to take a picture is you line up your shot, you focus as you need to, set the aperture, whatever you need it to be, cock the shutter, take the picture, trip the button, advance the film, and now you can see as it turns, it goes from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and you keep taking your shots as needed. Now you've gone through all of your film, you've taken all of your pictures, so what you need to do next is rewind it. And bear in mind, of course, for real pictures, the camera bag has to stay closed the whole time. To rewind it, you hold this button down, or push it once rather, and then rewind the film. It's kind of a pain. With a 36 exposure roll, it takes a while. As you rewind it, you can see on top that it counts backwards to to let you know how far along you are, which is a very, very nice feature, and I wish all cameras did it. It was not until electronic SLRs that SLRs caught up with that and started doing that as well on a regular basis. And you can see how that went. Inside it has what's called a leaf shutter. And a leaf shutter works by slightly different than a focal plane shutter. A focal plane shutter, like an SLR uses, has two pieces of fabric. Either one, they travel horizontally like this, open, take the picture, close, advance the film and cock the shutter. Or they travel vertically like that, or horizontally, where they open, take the picture, close, advance the film and cock the shutter, like that. A leaf shutter works slightly differently, where there are overlapping leaves, 3 or 4 of them, and when you take a picture they all open and then all close again. And they have to be further away from the film so that the light can spread out past the shutter to get to the film. They're very quiet, very accurate, and they cause almost no camera movement. I actually prefer leaf shutters over focal plane shutters, but SLR design is not conducive to leaf shutters. Let's change the lenses on this camera. So this is fiddly. To be kind, this is fiddly. First thing we need to do is unscrew the cap from this middle gear. One thing to bear in mind is you do not want to do this on the fly or out in the field, because there's a really good opportunity here to lose parts that you can't replace. Got to take that off. Now we've got to take the gear off. Now we've got to, this is focused all the way as close as it will go, and then we just keep turning and the lens will come off. Here you can see the shutter again and how it works. And now I'm just going to put this same lens back on because I don't have any other lenses, but there was a 100 and a 28 millimeter, which are a short range telephoto and a wide angle, that were available for this camera, made by Argus and Bausch and Lomb, I believe. And then there were some off-brand like Soligor and a few others that made 135s and other lenses for it as well. So there are a few options. They're not necessarily easy to find. But to put the new lens back on, you just screw it back in place and then bring this all the way to infinity. You want to make sure that this dial is set to infinity so that the infinity mark is lined up with that triangle. Now we're going to try and put this gear back in here, and you might have to adjust how this is seated. There we go. So that the gears line up. You don't want, if you can focus beyond infinity, then you've got problems. You don't want to be able to do that. Then once that gear is back in, there we go. Tighten that back up, and that's how you change the lenses on this. You can also take the lenses off to clean them, but like I said, strongly recommend not doing that if you're someplace like over a storm drain. So some additional and fun notes about the Argus C3 Matchmatic. This camera was made popular in the Harry Potter films, specifically the Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Apparently a character named Colin Creevey uses one of these to take a photo. And so there are people who consider this a Harry Potter collectible. I'm not one of those people. Also, so some other things, Argus was founded during the Depression, like I said. It lasted until the mid-1960s. And the C3, not the Matchmatic, but the C3 in general, all of the different versions of it, remain the best-selling American-made 35mm camera, and probably always will. So a couple of things not to do with your camera. First thing is, don't touch the shutter. If your finger oils get on the shutter, it can gum them up, it can damage the shutter leaves. If you stick your finger in when it's open and closing, you can destroy your shutter. It's a great way to brick, haha, get it, brick, a personally good, an otherwise just fine camera. Do not touch the mirrors. Well, actually, if you can touch the mirrors, then you've taken your camera apart, so it doesn't really matter. But if you do, for some reason, don't touch the mirrors, because the rangefinder mirrors are surface coated and the acid on your fingers will take the silver off. Don't leave your camera or lenses in your car, because they will suffer from heat damage. Leaf shutters especially are susceptible to heat-related damage, and you would have to, there are still people who fix these in 2014, but they are getting fewer and further between. Do not store your gear in a plastic bag or plastic box, because moisture will get in there and you will get fungus. And do not let your camera get wet, because even though they are well built, if the internal components rust, they will not function. And just remember, your camera, your Argus C3 Matchmatic, is a precision tool, and as long as you treat it with care and respect, it will return the favor with many, many years of reliable and good service. These cameras may not be the most expensive. This one cost me $15, but they still take good photos. So if this video was helpful, please leave me a thumbs up. That lets me know I'm on the right track. If you have any questions, by all means, please leave those in the comments section below. I'm pretty good about getting back to you pretty quickly. If you would like to subscribe, you can do that wherever the button is this year, and you'll know when I have more videos that come out. One last thing. Thank you guys for watching.